Sometimes our fondest memories of playing football are some of the memories that we had on the sidelines with the guys. Others might be on the sidelines with some of the pieces of equipment that are on there that we used every day, but probably don't think much about. Well, that's one of those stories we have today from football history. Timothy B. Brown joins us to tell us about another piece of football's antiquity. He's coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal for positive football history. And welcome to another exciting Tuesday as we have Timothy P. Brown of FootballArchaeology.com joining us to talk about another aspect of some antiquity of football. Tim, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Hey, Darren. Good to see you and hear your wonderful voice once again.
Yeah, I thought about for this segment, taking a string and some Dixie cups and using that to communicate for it. But I thought maybe that the listeners wouldn't get the audio or the video. So
yeah, well, and some of them probably aren't old enough to remember using Dixie cups and a piece of string to communicate over distances.
That's true. I can still remember tin cans too. So, but
yes,
that's beside the point. But that was a poor segue into our topic for this segment. Tim wrote an article back in May titled "Football and Paper Cups," and just a little sidebar of football, a little sideline information here, and always a great piece of football history. So we're excited to hear this.
Yeah. So this one, I'm old enough to remember the days of water discipline. And while I don't know that it was really severe in my day, you just didn't have total access to water, like is the assumption today, that there's whenever anybody wants water, they get it. But for a long time, for a century plus, in football and really just in any kind of sport in the military, water discipline was a big deal. And, there was this attempt to, I think at one level, they thought that, drinking water was a sign of weakness. It also maybe they thought was a bit unhealthy to do it in the middle of exercise, drinking cold water, especially. And, even, if you watch A Band of Brothers, there's a scene where the captain, what's his nuts, has them pour out their canteens, and obviously, somebody had broken water discipline, so it was all over. It was, kind of all throughout sports and anywhere, any situation where physical fitness was a big issue. And so it was terribly misinformed and made worse by the uniforms and equipment of the time. So, at the time, players wore these heavy, especially early on, heavy moleskin or canvas pants. They wore wool jerseys and later cotton jerseys, but all of them, like cotton absorbs and moleskin and canvas are cotton products. They absorb like 23 times their weight in water. So, your pants could get really heavy just from sweat. And then when the reason we have wicking fabrics is because it draws the sweat away from your body and allows your body to sweat. If it's all in the uniform, you don't sweat properly. And so you don't cool down properly. So anyways, these guys were in these, heavy leather helmets that didn't, release heat very well either. And they were often told, don't take your helmets off on the field. All those things contributed to people being, just really suffering from heat trauma. So that really changed. I mean, I attribute, the biggest change to the University of Florida's Gatorade studies and the studies that developed the Gatorade product in the mid 60s. And once it was shown, or at least once people believed that players who drank Gatorade performed better, especially late in games, then it was like, hey, okay, tell me no more. I want my players drinking Gatorade, and because it happened that the first year that Florida used Gatorade, they had like 4 come from behind victories, during the season. So everybody's like, oh, Gatorade. So and that really just, I mean, almost overnight things changed in that regard. So people gave access to water. And so anyways, that's all kind of background to the fact that, around the time that I wrote this article, I came across an image that was it was a Penn State trainer, guy named, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Jack Holme. And he had developed this metal tray that sat on top of the water bucket that you normally, back then everybody took water buckets out onto the field with a ladle, and then, the guys drank from that water bucket. They used the ladle to drink from the water bucket. Well, and oftentimes it would have like a bloody sponge. If they wiped off somebody's face, the sponge went right back in there. So, it was not, it wasn't the days of like blood on the uniform that we have now.
That really hits our modern sensibilities through COVID
Yes.
and everything, where we're, washing our hands 90 times a day and now we
Yeah.
have, ugh.
So he developed this tray that sat atop the water bucket, and that tray then had a bunch of little metal cups. So you could scoop water into the metal cup, and then each player could drink, individually. So I thought, okay, well, that's kind of a cool invention, but why didn't he just use paper cups? Which, when you ask a question like that, then you have to say, well, when did they first develop paper cups? And so, that led me down into that rabbit hole. And so it turns out that the paper cup really was, developed by an attorney who lived in Boston, early part of the 20th century, a guy named Lawrence Llewellyn. And so he develops paper cups in 1907, and, they were marketing them, having, some success. But in 1916, they changed the company name to Dixie Cups, which, pretty much everybody knows of now. And one of the other big things that they developed was, I think everybody's had those little ice cream. In the summer, you get this ice cream in a
Yeah,
paper cup and a lid and a wooden spoon.
wooden pallets spoon that they have
Yes,
there.
yeah, it's like a paddle.
Yeah.
So his company developed that product as well.
Oh,
And the funny thing is that, the paper cup didn't seem to really resonate with the football crowd, but, this lawyer is from Boston, and, across the Charles River is Harvard. And Percy Houghton, who was the coach at Harvard at the time, he had paper cups full of water delivered, taken onto the field for the players. So, Houghton was a brilliant guy, and at least that way, besides his coaching acumen and, winning multiple national titles. So then, the paper cup kind of becomes, it's just this thing that doesn't really quite fit, or, I mean, it's making some progress, but it starts becoming popular in the 20s and 30s because at the time, if you wanted a Coca-Cola, you went down to the drugstore and went to the fountain, and they made a Coca-Cola for you. And if you wanted to leave, you couldn't take the glass cup, so they charge you a penny to put it in a paper cup to walk out of there. So, I mean, as a kid, I remember all these Coca-Cola paper cups, and, I'm sure they're still around somewhere. But so, paper cups were coming on. And so, but it's still like, I mean, I've looked at, lots and lots of pictures of old time football, and I just don't see paper cups on the field. So it's like, okay, what was holding them back? And why, even in 46, when this article came out, was he still doing this metal thing? Well, I think the best explanation for that is World War II. There were paper shortages, and one of the last things you were going to do is use paper cups on a football field. So they kept using the water bucket and the ladle. And then, so pretty much, shortly after the war, then as paper became more available, then paper cups on the sideline became more popular, and the same tray or concept of the tray could be used for paper cups. Though, who knows, who knows if, I'm sure there were people using ladles for quite a while afterwards. But again, this is just one of those goofy little stories of, football using a technology that was available and had been available for 50 years before football, adopted it. So it's just one of those kind of slow things that somebody finally realizes, if we give them, the water in paper cups, it's more hygienic, it's, whatever. So anyway, it's just a goofy little story, but, I had fun kind of researching it and then writing it.
No, you had some great thing. It's a great story. A couple thoughts come to my mind. First of all, you telling the story of the attorney and the paper cup, and then renaming the company Dixie. It almost reminded me of like watching the History Channel Modern Marvels. Somebody comes up with an idea, and then, well, now it's Federal Express or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever they're talking about. So that was pretty cool. The other thing, when you're talking about Gatorade and coming out in the 60s, I know I've either read about it or heard about it where teams used to drink pickle juice to get the electrolytes. Did you ever hear stories of that?
I don't remember that, specifically, but, I mean, even like when I was in high school and early college, I think, we were still taking salt tablets,
Okay, right.
which is not a good idea, but, we did it because that's what we were told to do. Right.
Right.
So, I mean, that was the way, and I don't really know what was all in those salt tablets, but, they always had bottles of them sitting around. And so, I mean, and I mean, Gatorade replenishes some of the same things that are in salt tablets, but does so in different dosages. And there's lots of other, I mean, one of the things that when the scientists at, there are medical college people at Florida who were doing the research to develop Gatorade, and a lot of what they were doing initially was they were trying to find ways to figure out what was in the sweat. So they'd collect sweat off of football players. They'd wring out their clothing and, just to figure out, well, what is it that needs to be replenished, right? And so that, they jiggered around with it to figure out what was in there, but also what was palatable. What would somebody be willing to drink?
How'd you like to be the lab assistant on that? Hey, take that sweaty shirt and wring it out and tell me what's in it.
Well, I think there's some other assignments that are worse than that.
Probably. No, the other comment that came out, now it seems like it's more recent, like last 20 years, but the paper cups are like sort of cone shaped, like you used to get snow cones in. I don't remember seeing those when I was a kid, but was that the shape that the cups were when they first came out, the paper cups, or do you know what shape they were?
Yeah, I don't know. I was just assuming that they had a flat bottom, but yeah, it could be cylinder or the conical.
The conical ones are they're kind of brilliant because they're so utilitarian and probably much easier to manufacture and probably uses less paper and the whole process. But it's so simple. It's I don't know. I don't know what me to think about, because I had to use a bunch of those. I was on a cruise recently, and that's what they had for us when we came to shore. So it's those paper cups. Well, very cool story, Tim. Now that's a great piece of football history that you don't hear anywhere else. You don't most of us don't think about that stuff, but these guys had to drink water, and it was a brilliant idea with the paper cups. A brilliant idea with the gentleman from Penn State with the metal attachment to the bucket, so you don't have the bloody towels going in there in your drinking water. But you have a lot of different little unique stories and aspects of football that you research and you do a great job on. And how can people enjoy some of those on a more regular basis?
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest thing is just to go to footballarchaeology.com, subscribe, and you'll get an email every time I release an article. You'll get an email into your inbox. You can also follow me on Twitter, because I post each one of those as well. and on Threads, or, you just go out to the, you can follow me on the Substack platform as well, but, or just go out to the site whenever it suits your fancy and use the search function and try to find articles where you've got some curiosity.
Well, we certainly enjoy it, and we enjoy having you here on Tuesday, and we thank you again for joining us. Love to have you again next week to talk about another piece of football's antiquity, and love to hear some more.
I will do my best to be here.
All right. Thanks.
Have a good one. All right. Bye-bye.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.